The 2020 Solstice of Heroes is an event in Destiny 2 that will take place from August 11th to September 8th. This event will be very similar to the previous Solstice events. This video is created from data inside Destiny's API, and Bungie may make changes by event launch. One major change it seems Bungie has made for this event is there's one set of rare blue gear and two sets of purple legendary gear. So instead of green to blue to legendary once objectives have been completed, in each set it will go from rare to legendary Majestic to legendary Magnificent. Firstly, let's look at the rewards for the event. There are 2 exotic emotes, Catching Rays and Power Rising, 2 legendary emotes, Sweltering Heat and Twisty Dance, and 1 legendary multiplayer emote, Intimidating Snap. Ghosts are getting hats. There are 3 new ghosts that will be obtainable, the Spelunking Shell, Cabana Shell, and Backspin Shell. The source of these 3 ghost shells is Eververse. There are also 2 new projections and 2 new exotic sparrows, which are obtained from Eververse. The 2 new sparrows are Ira's Grace and On Guild Wings. The new ship that can be obtained from the event is the Soul Piercer. Pretty cool looking ship. I wonder if you'll have to complete the sets of gear on all 3 characters to obtain like in previous years. Or will it just be bought from Eververse? The 2 new shaders, an emblem, and transmogrific effect is also obtainable. Since objectives are different on each piece of equipment on each of the 3 classes, I'll do the classes in order, starting with Titan, then Warlock, and finally Hunter. The Magnificent Gear objective on each piece of gear is the same on all 3 classes, and will be shown at the end. Starting with the rare Solstice gear for the Titan, the helmet will require 1 European area zone completion, 50 precision final blows, and you will need to defeat 100 hive enemies. The rare Solstice gauntlets will require you to kill 50 combatants in the EAZ, 50 super ability kills, and 50 kills using an ARC subclass on the EAZ. The chest piece will require you to complete 5 adventures, collect 100 solar orbs and strikes, and defeat 25 opposing guardians in the Crucible or Gambit. The leg armor will require you to complete 5 public events on Nessus, collect 100 void orbs in the Crucible or Gambit, and unlock 10 Solstice packages. The Titan mark will require you to complete 5 playlist strikes, collect 400 elemental orbs in any activity, and complete 5 Crucible or Gambit matches. Once those objectives are completed, you will be rewarded with the Majestic Solstice gear. Here are the objectives for each piece of gear that you will need to complete to be rewarded with the Magnificent version. The helmet will require 10 Gambit match completions, 1000 elemental orbs using a matching Arc Solar Void subclass, and as a team defeat 100 opposing guardians in the Crucible or Gambit using Arc weapons. The gauntlets will require you to complete 10 heroic public events, defeat 100 combatants with abilities, and defeat 20 bosses. The chest armor will require 600 combatants defeated in the Strike playlist using a subclass that matches the day, defeat 200 enemies in the EAZ, and defeat 300 Fallen using a subclass that matches the day. The leg armor will require you to defeat 2000 enemies with elemental damage, collect 300 void orbs in any strike, and defeat 100 combatants with solar melee attacks. The Titan mark will require you to complete 5 patrols on Isle, collect 200 elemental orbs of any type in the EAZ, and defeat 300 enemies with solar weapons. Now on to the Warlock and the renewed Solstice gear objectives. The helmet will require 1 completion of the EAZ, 50 precision final blows, and 100 Cabal combatants defeated. The gauntlets will require 5 playlist strike completions, 400 elemental orbs collected in any activity, and 25 opposing guardians defeated in Crucible or Gambit. The chest armor requires 5 adventures completed, 100 arc orbs in the Crucible collected, and 10 Solstice packages unlocked. The leg armor requires you to defeat 50 enemies in the EAZ, collect 100 solar orbs and strikes, and defeat 50 combatants in the EAZ with a Void Super subclass equipped. The Warlock bond requires you to complete 5 public events, defeat 50 enemies with super abilities, and complete 5 Crucible or Gambit matches. Once those objectives are completed, you will be rewarded with the Majestic Solstice gear. Here are the objectives for each piece of gear that you will need to complete to be rewarded with the Magnificent version. The Warlock helmet requires 600 combatants defeated in Strike playlists using a subclass that matches the day, collect 200 elemental orbs in the EAZ, and defeat 20 bosses. The Warlock gauntlets requires you to get 2000 elemental final blows, collect 1000 elemental orbs using a matching subclass, and as a team defeat 100 opposing guardians with solar weapons. The Warlock chest armor requires you to complete 10 Gambit matches, defeat 100 combatants with abilities, and defeat 300 enemies with void weapons. The Warlock leg armor requires you to complete 10 heroic public events, collect 300 solar orbs in any strike, and defeat 300 hive using a subclass that matches the day. The Warlock bond requires 5 Titan patrol completions, 200 enemies defeated in the EAZ, and 150 arc super final blows on opposing guardians in the Crucible or Gambit. And now finally the Hunter. Here are the objectives for the renewed gear. The helmet will require 1 AEIZ completion, 50 precision final blows, and 100 full undefeated. The gauntlets will require you to complete 5 playlist strikes, collect 100 solar orbs in Gambit, and unlock 10 Solstice packages. The chest armor will require you to defeat 50 combatants in the EAZ, collect 400 elemental orbs in any activity, and defeat 50 combatants in the EAZ while a solar subclass is equipped. The leg armor will require you to complete 5 public events on Nessus, defeat 50 combatants with super abilities, and defeat 25 opposing guardians in the Crucible or Gambit. The cloak will require 5 adventure completions, 100 arc orbs collected in strikes, and 5 Crucible or Gambit match completions. Once those objectives are completed, you'll be rewarded with the Majestic Solstice gear. Here are the objectives for each piece of gear that you'll need to complete to be rewarded with the Magnificent version. The Hunter helmet will require you to defeat 2,000 combatants with the elemental damage, defeat 200 combatants in EAZ, and defeat 300 combatants with arc weapons. The Hunter gauntlets will require 10 heroic public event completions, 300 arc orbs and strikes collected, and 300 Cabal defeated while using a subclass that matches the day. The Hunter chest armor requires you to complete 10 Gambit matches, collect 1,000 elemental orbs using a matching subclass, and defeat 100 enemies with void grenades. The Hunter leg armor requires 600 enemies defeated in the strike playlists using a subclass that matches the day, 100 enemies defeated with abilities, and as a team, 100 guardians defeated in the Crucible or Gambit using void weapons. The Hunter cloak requires you to complete 5 patrols on the EDZ, collect 200 elemental orbs in the EAZ, and defeat 20 bosses. I believe it will work like previous Solstice events. In order to masterwork the gear, you will need to complete the following objectives. These are the same on all 3 classes. The helmet will require you to complete the Nightfall Ordeal Strike on Master difficulty. The gauntlets will require you to complete a Nightmare Hunt on the moon. The chest armor requires a Pit of Heresy completion on the moon. The leg armor requires 7 wins in the Trials of Osiris. This is a big yikes if you want to do this on all 3 characters. And finally, the class item requires you to defeat the final boss in Altars of Sorrow. To conclude this video, I want to quickly go over some other details related to the 2020 Solstice of Heroes event. You'll be able to purchase universal ornaments that adds a glow to your gear. You can equip this ornament to any of your 3 legendary gear. The Solstice packages will include ornaments with built-in subclass colored glows, where the intensity increases with super energy charge. Just like any other event or vendor, Eva Levante will have daily and additional bounties to complete. This video contains all the information that has been released in the API for the 2020 Solstice of Heroes event. Obviously things can change, and I'll make another video when the event starts to explain any changes and to show off the rewards in game. As always, thanks for watching my Destiny video.